The notification sound on my phone felt different that morning, sharper somehow, as I sat in the mahogany-paneled boardroom of Coastal Industries headquarters, watching Marcus Brennan, the man who had dismissed my ideas for 3 years, confidently address a room full of worried investors. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled as always, his custom Italian suit impeccable, but there was something in his eyes I had never seen before. Genuine fear disguised as corporate bravado. He clicked to the next slide, his voice steady despite the circumstances, completely unaware that the woman he had consistently overlooked was about to become his biggest nightmare. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced to the packed conference room, his tone carrying the practiced authority of someone who had spent decades believing his own press releases. While it's true that TechFlow Solutions has been gaining market share, I want to assure you that Coastal Industries remains the dominant force in enterprise software management. Their recent acquisitions are nothing more than desperate attempts to compete with our established infrastructure. The irony of his words sent a chill of satisfaction down my spine, knowing what I knew, sitting where I sat, with the paperwork in my briefcase that would shatter his carefully constructed world in exactly 47 minutes. My name is Sarah Martinez, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I would be sitting in a shareholders meeting watching the CEO who had systematically ignored every innovative proposal I had submitted over the past 3 years, unknowingly seal his own fate. As Senior Product Development Manager at Coastal Industries, I had spent countless nights in my small Austin apartment, developing strategies that could have revolutionized our approach to client retention and market expansion. But Marcus Brennan had a particular blind spot when it came to recognizing talent that didn't come wrapped in an Ivy League pedigree and a 6-figure wardrobe. The morning that changed everything had started 18 months earlier, in the cramped coffee shop 3 blocks from Coastal's downtown Austin campus, where I spent most of my lunch breaks reviewing industry reports and sketching out product improvement ideas. I had been nursing my 3rd cup of coffee that Tuesday afternoon, laptop balanced precariously on the small wooden table, when I stumbled across a news article that made my pulse quicken. TechFlow Solutions, a mid-sized competitor based in Dallas, was hemorrhaging talent and struggling with a series of product failures that had cost them nearly 30% of their client base in 6 months. Most people would have seen a company in decline, but I saw something else entirely. I saw an opportunity that could transform Coastal Industries from a regional player into a national powerhouse, if someone had the vision to recognize it. TechFlow's core technology platform, despite their recent struggles, represented exactly the kind of innovation that Marcus had been claiming we needed to develop internally for years. Their client management system, when properly integrated, could complement our existing infrastructure in ways that would create unprecedented synergies. That evening, I stayed up until 3 in the morning crafting what I genuinely believed was the most comprehensive acquisition proposal of my career. I analyzed TechFlow's financials, projected integration costs, outlined potential revenue streams, and created detailed timelines for combining our technologies. By dawn, I had produced a 40-page document that demonstrated how acquiring TechFlow at their current distressed valuation could increase Coastal's market share by 40% within 18 months, while providing access to their proprietary algorithms that had been the envy of the industry before their management failures. I spent the next week refining every detail, consulting with colleagues in finance and operations, and even reaching out to my former classmates at UT Austin who had connections in the Dallas tech scene to verify my assumptions about TechFlow's actual situation. Everything confirmed what I had suspected. This was a once-in-a-decade opportunity for the right company with the right vision to make a transformative acquisition. The email I crafted to Marcus was perhaps the most carefully worded message I had ever written. I outlined the opportunity clearly but concisely, attached my detailed analysis, and requested just 15 minutes of his time to present what I believed could be a game-changing strategy for Coastal Industries. I sent it on a Wednesday morning at 8:45, timing it to arrive just as Marcus typically reviewed his daily schedule, according to his assistant Jennifer, whom I had befriended over coffee several months earlier. His response arrived exactly 6 hours later, forwarded through his assistant with a brief note that he had reviewed the proposal and determined it fell outside current strategic priorities. No meeting, no discussion, no acknowledgement of the weeks of research and analysis I had invested. Just a polite corporate dismissal that felt like a door slamming shut on everything I had been trying to contribute to the company. But Marcus Brennan had made a critical miscalculation about who I was and what I was capable of when properly motivated. He had seen my proposal as the ambitious musings of a mid-level employee who didn't understand the complexities of corporate strategy. What he had failed to recognize was that I came from a family of entrepreneurs who had taught me that when traditional channels fail, you create your own path forward. My grandfather, Roberto Martinez, had immigrated from Mexico with nothing but a toolbox and an unshakable belief that hard work and smart thinking could overcome any obstacle. He had built a small construction company that eventually employed over 200 people across Central Texas. My father had taken those lessons and applied them to real estate development, creating affordable housing projects that transformed neighborhoods while generating substantial returns for investors. They had both taught me that the most valuable skill in business was recognizing opportunities that others missed or dismissed. The morning after receiving Marcus's rejection, I found myself sitting in my grandmother's kitchen in East Austin, the same kitchen where 3 generations of Martinez women had made decisions that shaped our family's future. Abuela Elena, now 87 and still sharp as the day she had helped my grandfather secure his first construction loan, listened patiently as I explained my frustration with Coastal's lack of vision. "Mija," she said finally, her weathered hands wrapped around her cup of café con leche, "your grandfather used to say that the difference between successful people and everyone else isn't intelligence or luck. It's the willingness to act when others hesitate." She paused, studying my face with the intensity that had intimidated business partners for decades. "You know this TechFlow company is valuable. You know how to make it work. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" That conversation planted a seed that grew steadily over the following weeks. While Marcus and the Coastal executive team continued their quarterly planning sessions focused on incremental improvements and cost-cutting measures, I began quietly exploring a possibility that seemed audacious even to me. What if, instead of convincing Coastal to acquire TechFlow, I found a way to acquire it myself? The initial research was daunting. TechFlow Solutions, despite their recent struggles, was still valued at approximately $12 million. Even in their distressed state, that represented more money than I could access through conventional means. But as I dug deeper into their situation, I discovered details that made the opportunity even more compelling than I had originally realized. TechFlow's primary challenge wasn't their technology or their client relationships, both of which remained fundamentally strong. Their problem was leadership and cash flow management. The founding CEO, David Chen, was a brilliant technologist who had never developed the business acumen necessary to scale a growing company. Their recent losses stemmed from a series of expensive partnerships with marketing firms that had overpromised results while delivering minimal value. More importantly, I learned through industry contacts that David was actively seeking either an acquisition by a larger company or a partnership with someone who could provide both capital and operational expertise. He had reportedly turned down several offers from private equity firms because he wanted to maintain some control over the company's direction and ensure his employees were treated fairly during any transition. This discovery led me to reach out to David directly, initially just to learn more about TechFlow's situation. Our first phone call lasted 3 hours, during which I became convinced that my original assessment had been conservative. TechFlow wasn't just a good acquisition target. It was a company with extraordinary potential that needed the right kind of leadership to unlock its value. David and I met for coffee in Dallas the following weekend, and I was immediately struck by his passion for the technology they had developed and his genuine concern for his team. TechFlow employed 47 people, many of whom had been with the company since its founding 6 years earlier. David's primary goal wasn't maximizing his personal return. It was ensuring that his employees had secure futures and that the technology they had built would be used to its full potential. During that conversation, an idea began forming that seemed impossible and inevitable at the same time. What if I could structure a deal that would allow me to acquire TechFlow through a combination of outside investors, seller financing, and my own resources, while giving David the operational partnership he was seeking? The numbers would be challenging, but not impossible if I could convince the right people to believe in the vision. I spent the next month developing a business plan that went far beyond my original acquisition analysis for Coastal. This plan outlined how TechFlow's technology could be enhanced and scaled, how their client relationships could be leveraged for expansion, and how the right strategic vision could transform them from a struggling mid-sized company into a major player in the enterprise software market. The financial modeling required evening and weekend work that rivaled anything I had done at Coastal, but this time I was working for myself rather than hoping someone else would recognize my ideas. I created detailed projections showing how TechFlow could achieve profitability within 8 months, with the right operational improvements, and how their technology could be positioned to capture market share from larger competitors who had become complacent. Finding investors proved less difficult than I had anticipated, largely because the opportunity was genuinely compelling when presented with proper analysis and realistic projections. My father introduced me to several real estate investors who were looking to diversify into technology, and my network from business school at UT Austin included several people who had moved into venture capital and private equity. The breakthrough came when I presented the opportunity to Carmen Rodriguez, a former classmate who had founded a successful investment firm specializing in technology acquisitions. Carmen had been looking for opportunities in the enterprise software space and immediately recognized the potential in what I was proposing. More importantly, she understood that my industry knowledge and operational experience could be just as valuable as the financial investment. Carmen agreed to lead a funding round that would provide the majority of the acquisition capital in exchange for a significant equity stake, while also structuring the deal to give me operational control and a substantial ownership position. David Chen was receptive to the arrangement because it provided him with the capital injection TechFlow needed, while partnering him with someone who understood both the technology and the market. The legal and financial complexity of structuring the acquisition consumed every spare moment I had for 3 months, but the framework that emerged was exactly what I had envisioned. I would acquire 70% of TechFlow through a combination of investor funding and seller financing, while David would retain 20% and continue as Chief Technology Officer. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The remaining 10% would be reserved for employee equity participation, ensuring that the team that had built the company would share in its future success. Throughout this entire process, I maintained my position at Coastal Industries, continuing to submit product development proposals that were systematically ignored by Marcus and his executive team. The irony wasn't lost on me that while they dismissed my ideas for improving Coastal's competitive position, I was secretly developing the capability to challenge them directly. The final negotiations with David Chen took place in a small conference room at his lawyer's office in downtown Dallas on a Thursday afternoon in late October. As we signed the paperwork that would transfer ownership of TechFlow Solutions, David looked across the table with an expression that mixed relief with anticipation. "You know," he said, carefully organizing the signed documents into neat stacks, "I've been in this industry for 12 years, and I've never met anyone who understood our technology and our market opportunity as clearly as you do. TechFlow is going to be in good hands." He paused, studying my face with genuine curiosity. "What I don't understand is why you're leaving a secure position at an established company like Coastal to take on this kind of risk." I smiled, thinking about all the emails Marcus had never responded to, all the meetings where my ideas had been politely dismissed, all the opportunities that had been overlooked by people who couldn't see past their own assumptions about what innovation looked like. "Because sometimes the biggest risk is staying in a place that doesn't value what you have to offer," I replied. "I'd rather bet on myself than wait for someone else to recognize my potential." That evening, I called my father to tell him that the acquisition had been finalized and that I would be submitting my resignation to Coastal Industries the following Monday. His response was characteristically direct. "Mija, your grandfather would be proud. You saw an opportunity, you did your homework, and you had the courage to act. Now comes the hard part, proving you were right." He was absolutely correct about the challenges ahead. Acquiring TechFlow was just the beginning. Transforming it into the company I envisioned would require every skill I had developed during my years at Coastal, plus several I would need to learn quickly. But for the first time in my professional life, I would be working for someone who believed in my ideas, myself. The weekend before my final week at Coastal, I met with David and the TechFlow team to begin planning our integration strategy and operational improvements. Walking through their offices in Dallas, seeing the enthusiasm and talent that had been constrained by financial limitations and uncertain leadership, I felt a surge of excitement about what we could accomplish together. Their development team had created software solutions that were genuinely innovative but had never been properly marketed or scaled. Their client relationships were strong but underutilized for expansion opportunities. Their operational systems needed refinement but provided a solid foundation for growth. Everything I saw confirmed that my analysis had been accurate. TechFlow was a company with extraordinary potential that simply needed the right vision and resources to unlock its value. Monday morning arrived with the strange sensation of walking into Coastal Industries for what would be one of my final times as an employee. I had prepared my resignation letter carefully, keeping it professional but making clear that I was leaving to pursue an entrepreneurial opportunity rather than joining another company. I requested a meeting with Marcus to deliver the news personally, more out of professional courtesy than any expectation of meaningful conversation. Jennifer, Marcus's assistant, scheduled me for a 15-minute slot late Tuesday afternoon, noting that his calendar was particularly busy that week due to quarterly planning meetings. I used the intervening time to transition my current projects to colleagues and document everything that would need to be handled during my absence, maintaining the same level of professionalism I had always brought to my work at Coastal. The meeting with Marcus took place in his corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin. He was focused on his computer screen when I entered, barely glancing up as he gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Jennifer mentioned you wanted to discuss something time-sensitive," he said, his tone suggesting that whatever I had to say should be concluded quickly. "I'm submitting my resignation," I said directly, placing the letter on his desk. "My last day will be 2 weeks from Friday, which should provide sufficient time to transition my current responsibilities." This got his attention. Marcus looked up from his screen, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to genuine surprise. "Resignation? What's this about, Sarah? Is it a compensation issue? Are you joining a competitor?" I had anticipated these questions and had prepared responses that were truthful without being provocative. "I'm pursuing an entrepreneurial opportunity that aligns better with my long-term career goals," I explained. "I'm grateful for the experience I've gained at Coastal, and I want to ensure a smooth transition for my replacement." Marcus leaned back in his chair, clearly trying to process this unexpected development. "Entrepreneurial opportunity? What kind of business are you starting?" His tone suggested genuine curiosity, mixed with the kind of skepticism he reserved for ideas that didn't originate from established sources. "I've acquired a technology company that I'll be operating and expanding," I replied, keeping my explanation deliberately general. "It's in a complementary space to what we do here at Coastal, but focused on different market segments." "Acquired a company?" Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's quite an ambitious step. I hope you've done your due diligence on the financial risks involved. The technology sector can be unforgiving for inexperienced operators." His condescending tone was familiar, the same dismissive attitude I had encountered whenever I had presented ideas that challenged his assumptions about market opportunities or strategic priorities. But this time, instead of frustration, I felt a calm sense of satisfaction knowing that his limitations were about to become his problem rather than mine. "I appreciate your concern," I said evenly. "I've conducted extensive analysis and secured appropriate funding and advisory support. I'm confident in the opportunity." Marcus nodded absently, already turning his attention back to his computer screen. "Well, I'm sure HR will handle the transition details. We'll miss your contributions to the product development team." As I left his office, I reflected on the profound irony of that brief conversation. Marcus had just wished me well on an acquisition that he had refused to consider when I had proposed it for Coastal Industries 18 months earlier. The technology company I had acquired was the same TechFlow Solutions I had identified as a transformative opportunity that could have revolutionized Coastal's market position. The next 2 weeks passed quickly as I wrapped up my responsibilities and prepared for the transition to full-time leadership of TechFlow. My colleagues at Coastal were genuinely supportive, many expressing admiration for my entrepreneurial courage, while also noting that they would miss working with someone who consistently brought innovative thinking to product development challenges. On my final day at Coastal, several team members organized a small farewell gathering in the break room, complete with cake and good-natured speeches about my willingness to challenge conventional thinking. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same qualities that had made me popular with my peers, curiosity, analytical thinking, willingness to question assumptions, had made me largely invisible to senior leadership. As I cleaned out my desk that Friday afternoon, packing away 3 years of project files and industry research, I discovered a folder containing printed copies of every proposal I had submitted to Marcus during my tenure at Coastal. The TechFlow acquisition analysis was there, along with detailed recommendations for product improvements, market expansion strategies, and operational efficiency initiatives that had never been implemented. Looking through those documents, I was struck by how many opportunities Coastal had missed simply because their leadership couldn't recognize good ideas when they didn't come from expected sources. But rather than feeling bitter about the years of dismissed proposals, I felt grateful for the experience that had taught me to trust my own judgment and prepared me for the challenges ahead. That evening, I celebrated my transition with dinner at my grandmother's house, surrounded by 3 generations of Martinez family members who had gathered to mark this significant milestone. As we shared stories about entrepreneurial risks and family business traditions, Abuela Elena raised her glass of wine with a toast that captured exactly how I was feeling. "To Sarah," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed 7 decades of business decisions, who had the wisdom to recognize an opportunity and the courage to seize it when others couldn't see its value. "Your grandfather would say you're finally ready to build something of your own." The following Monday morning, I walked into TechFlow's offices in Dallas as the new majority owner and CEO, ready to begin the work of transforming a struggling company into the industry leader I knew it could become. David Chen was waiting in what would now be our shared conference room, along with the senior management team who would be implementing the operational improvements we had been planning. "Welcome to your company," David said with a smile that mixed relief with anticipation. "The team is excited to see what we can accomplish with proper resources and strategic direction." Looking around the room at the talented people who would be working with me to build something extraordinary, I felt a surge of excitement about the challenges and opportunities ahead. For the first time in my professional life, I would be working for someone who valued innovative thinking and strategic vision: myself. The transformation began immediately, with a comprehensive review of every aspect of TechFlow's operations, from their software development processes to their client relationship management systems. Working 18-hour days, I threw myself into understanding every detail of how the company functioned and where improvements could be implemented most effectively. Within the first month, we had restructured their development teams to focus on their most promising products, renegotiated several client contracts to better reflect the value of their services, and begun implementing the operational improvements I had outlined in my original acquisition analysis. The results were almost immediate. Client satisfaction scores improved, employee morale increased, and cash flow began stabilizing. But the real test would come in the months ahead, as we worked to scale the business and establish TechFlow as a legitimate competitor to companies like Coastal Industries. Marcus Brennan and his executive team had no idea that the employee they had dismissed was now leading a company with the technology and vision to challenge their market dominance. As I sat in my new office that first evening, reviewing financial projections and strategic plans, I thought about the email Marcus had ignored 18 months earlier and wondered how different things might have been if he had taken 15 minutes to listen to what I had to say. But that was his loss and my opportunity, and I intended to make the most of it. The transformation of TechFlow from struggling startup to industry contender would require everything I had learned during my years of having my ideas dismissed and my potential overlooked. But now, instead of hoping someone else would recognize the value of innovative thinking, I had the authority and resources to prove it myself. And Marcus Brennan was about to discover exactly what he had lost when he chose to ignore my email. The first 6 months of transforming TechFlow felt like drinking from a fire hose while learning to juggle flaming torches. Every morning brought new challenges that tested every skill I had developed during my years at Coastal, plus several I was discovering I needed to acquire quickly. The learning curve was steep enough to make me question my sanity on more than one occasion. but the progress we were making validated every assumption I had made about the company's potential. My daily routine began at 5:30 in the morning with a 30-minute drive from my apartment in Deep Ellum to TechFlow's headquarters in the Dallas Design District. The building itself was a converted warehouse, with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting that gave it the authentic startup atmosphere that David Chen had cultivated since founding the company. But beneath the trendy exterior, I was discovering operational challenges that would have intimidated someone with less determination. The first crisis emerged within my second week of ownership, when our largest client, Henderson Manufacturing, threatened to terminate their contract due to persistent software integration issues that had been plaguing their system for months. Henderson represented nearly 20% of our monthly recurring revenue, and losing them would have created a cash flow crisis that could have jeopardized our entire transformation plan. I spent 3 days in Henderson's Phoenix offices, working directly with their IT team to understand the root causes of their integration problems. What I discovered was a combination of inadequate documentation from our development team and unrealistic expectations that had been set during the original sales process. The previous sales manager had overpromised capabilities that our software couldn't deliver without significant customization. Fixing the Henderson situation required me to personally oversee the development of custom integration modules while simultaneously renegotiating the contract terms to reflect the additional work required. It meant 16-hour days for 2 weeks straight, but we not only saved the Henderson contract, we transformed them into one of our most satisfied clients and secured a 3-year extension that included provisions for additional services. The Henderson crisis taught me valuable lessons about the importance of accurate communication between sales and development teams, leading to the implementation of new protocols that would prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. More importantly, it demonstrated to the TechFlow team that their new CEO was willing to roll up her sleeves and solve problems directly rather than simply delegating them to others. David Chen proved to be an invaluable partner during this transition period, bringing technical expertise that complemented my business strategy skills perfectly. Our weekly planning sessions became collaborative strategy workshops, where we could combine his deep understanding of our technology capabilities with my analysis of market opportunities and competitive positioning. One particularly productive session took place on a rainy Thursday afternoon in late February, as we reviewed the preliminary results from our first quarter under new ownership. The numbers were encouraging. Client retention had improved from 73% to 88%. Average contract values had increased by 15%, and our employee satisfaction scores had reached the highest levels in company history. The operational improvements are working exactly as you projected, David noted, reviewing the quarterly dashboard we had developed to track key performance indicators. But I'm curious about your thoughts on the longer-term competitive strategy. Where do you see us positioning ourselves relative to the larger players in the market? It was a question I had been anticipating, and one that went to the heart of my original vision for acquiring TechFlow. We're not going to compete by trying to match the scale of companies like Coastal Industries, I explained, pulling up the competitive analysis I had been refining since the acquisition. Our advantage comes from being more agile, more responsive to client needs, and more innovative in our approach to solving complex integration challenges. The strategy I outlined focused on establishing TechFlow as the premium alternative for clients who were frustrated with the bureaucratic inflexibility of larger enterprise software providers, while companies like Coastal focused on standardized solutions that could be deployed across hundreds of clients. We would specialize in customized implementations that delivered superior results for sophisticated users. This approach required us to attract and retain exceptionally talented developers who could handle complex technical challenges. But it also allowed us to charge premium rates that more than compensated for the additional development time required. Within 6 months, our average project value had increased by 40%, while our project delivery timelines had actually improved due to better planning and more realistic scope definitions. The talent acquisition component of our strategy proved particularly successful, as word spread through the Dallas tech community that TechFlow had become a place where developers could work on genuinely challenging projects with cutting-edge technology. We began attracting senior engineers from larger companies who were frustrated with bureaucratic constraints and excited about the opportunity to have more direct impact on product development. One of our most significant hires was Maria Gonzalez, a former senior architect at IBM who had grown tired of working on incremental improvements to legacy systems. Maria brought 15 years of enterprise software experience and a network of industry contacts that opened doors we couldn't have accessed otherwise. Her decision to join TechFlow sent a signal to the broader market that we were serious about competing at the highest levels. Maria's first major contribution was leading the development of our enhanced API framework, which addressed one of the most common complaints we heard from prospective clients about our competitors' products. The existing industry standard for software integration required extensive custom coding for each implementation, making projects expensive and time-consuming. Our new framework reduced integration time by an average of 60%, while providing more robust functionality than anything available from established providers. The development process took 4 months and required a significant investment in both time and resources, but the results exceeded even my optimistic projections for its market impact. The API framework became our signature differentiator, generating interest from potential clients who had never heard of TechFlow but were intrigued by the technical capabilities we could demonstrate. Word-of-mouth referrals increased dramatically, and our sales pipeline began filling with opportunities that would have been impossible to access just months earlier. But success in the technology industry inevitably attracts competitive responses, and by late spring, I began hearing through industry contacts that Coastal Industries was starting to take notice of our growing market presence. The first indication came during a conference call with a prospective client who mentioned that they had been contacted by Coastal's sales team shortly after our initial presentation to them. Jennifer Walsh, the procurement director at Austin Financial Group, was refreshingly direct about the situation when I called to follow up on our proposal. "I'll be honest with you, Sarah," she said, her tone suggesting she was accustomed to navigating competitive software evaluations. "Coastal reached out to us within days of your presentation. They're offering significantly more aggressive pricing than their usual rates, and they're claiming they can deliver everything you're proposing plus additional features we hadn't even considered." This was exactly the kind of competitive response I had anticipated, but experiencing it firsthand was still concerning. Coastal had resources that we couldn't match, established relationships throughout the Austin business community, and the ability to price products below cost if necessary to prevent market share losses. The Austin Financial Group opportunity became a test case for our ability to compete against larger, more established providers on our own terms. Rather than trying to match Coastal's pricing, I focused our presentation on demonstrating the superior quality and customization capabilities that justified our premium rates. The evaluation process stretched over 6 weeks, during which both companies provided detailed technical demonstrations and responded to extensive questionnaires about implementation timelines, support capabilities, and long-term product development roadmaps. It was exactly the kind of rigorous competition that would determine whether TechFlow could establish itself as a legitimate alternative to industry leaders. The decision meeting took place on a Wednesday morning in Austin Financial's conference room, with Jennifer Walsh and 3 other executives evaluating both proposals side by side. I had driven down from Dallas specifically for this presentation, knowing that the outcome would have implications far beyond this single contract. Jennifer's feedback was comprehensive and thoughtful, clearly reflecting serious consideration of both alternatives. "Coastal's proposal offers more features and lower pricing," she began, "but your demonstration convinced us that TechFlow's approach would deliver superior results for our specific requirements. The customization capabilities and responsiveness you've shown throughout this process give us confidence that you'll be a true partner rather than just a vendor." Winning the Austin Financial Group contract represented more than just additional revenue. It validated our strategic positioning and demonstrated that we could compete successfully against Coastal Industries on the basis of superior value rather than lower prices. The contract also included provisions for additional modules that could potentially double its value over the 3-year term. The success with Austin Financial Group led to other opportunities throughout Texas, as word spread through the financial services community about our capabilities. By the end of our first year under new ownership, TechFlow's annual revenue had increased by 85%. Our client base had expanded to include several Fortune 500 companies, and our employee count had grown from 47 to 73 people. But the most satisfying development was watching the transformation of the company culture as our success created new opportunities for professional growth and recognition. David Chen had evolved from a frustrated founder struggling with operational challenges into a confident CTO leading one of the most innovative development teams in the region. Maria Gonzalez had become our chief architect, overseeing technical standards that were being adopted by other companies as industry best practices. The entire team had embraced the entrepreneurial energy that comes from being part of something that's growing rapidly and making a real impact in the marketplace. Employee retention reached 96%, and we began receiving unsolicited resumes from talented professionals who wanted to join what they saw as one of the most exciting technology companies in Texas. By late fall, industry publications were starting to take notice of TechFlow's rapid ascent. Tech Austin magazine featured us in their Rising Stars issue, highlighting our innovative approach to enterprise software integration and our success in competing against much larger established companies. The article included quotes from several clients praising our responsiveness and technical capabilities. More significantly, we were invited to present at the Southwest Technology Conference, an annual event that attracted CIOs and IT decision-makers from across the region. This was exactly the kind of visibility that could accelerate our growth by introducing our capabilities to hundreds of potential clients simultaneously. I spent weeks preparing for the conference presentation, working with David and Maria to develop a demonstration that would showcase our most advanced capabilities while explaining the business benefits in terms that non-technical executives could appreciate. The presentation would be our opportunity to establish TechFlow as a thought leader in enterprise software innovation. The conference took place at the Austin Convention Center, the same facility where I had attended Coastal Industries' annual user conference as an employee just 18 months earlier. The irony of returning as a competitor wasn't lost on me, particularly when I noticed that Marcus Brennan was listed among the keynote speakers for the event. Our presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning in one of the main auditoriums, with an expected attendance of over 300 technology executives. As I reviewed my slides one final time in the Hotel Business Center the night before, I reflected on how dramatically my professional situation had changed since my last visit to this building. 18 months ago, I had been sitting in the audience listening to other people present their visions for the future of enterprise technology. Tomorrow, I would be on stage sharing insights based on the real-world success we had achieved in transforming TechFlow into a legitimate competitor to companies like Coastal Industries. The presentation itself exceeded my expectations, with engaged questions from the audience and several requests for follow-up meetings with potential clients. But the most memorable moment came during the networking reception afterward, when I found myself standing near the registration table reviewing my notes from the day's sessions. "Sarah Martinez?" a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to see Marcus Brennan approaching with his characteristic, confident smile, apparently unaware of the dramatic irony of this encounter. "I heard you were presenting today. Congratulations on your entrepreneurial success with TechFlow Solutions." The conversation that followed was surreal in its casualness, as Marcus asked polite questions about my experience transitioning from corporate employment to business ownership. He seemed genuinely curious about the challenges of running a technology company, apparently viewing me as an interesting case study rather than a competitive threat. "It's quite an ambitious leap," he noted, clearly impressed by what he had heard about TechFlow's growth. "The enterprise software market can be challenging for smaller companies. How are you finding the competition with more established providers?" I managed to keep my expression neutral while responding to his questions, providing general insights about market dynamics without revealing anything about our specific strategies or client relationships. But internally, I was savoring the irony of discussing competitive challenges with the CEO, whose company had become our primary target for market share acquisition. The conversation concluded with Marcus offering generic advice about the importance of focusing on sustainable growth rather than trying to expand too quickly. "Companies like Coastal have learned that lesson through decades of experience," he said with paternal confidence. "There's value in taking a measured approach to market expansion." As I watched him walk away to join a group of other industry executives, I couldn't help but smile at his complete lack of awareness about what TechFlow was becoming and how directly we were beginning to challenge his company's market position. His dismissive attitude toward potential competition was exactly the kind of complacency that would make our continued growth easier to achieve. The networking reception also provided opportunities to connect with potential clients who had been impressed by our presentation earlier that day. I collected business cards from decision-makers at 6 companies that represented significant expansion opportunities, each expressing interest in learning more about our capabilities. One particularly promising conversation was with Robert Kim, the CTO of Dynamic Systems, a rapidly growing logistics company based in Houston. Robert was frustrated with his current software provider's inability to customize their platform for Dynamic's specific operational requirements, exactly the kind of challenge that TechFlow was designed to address. "Your presentation today was exactly what I needed to hear," Robert explained as we discussed his company's technical challenges. "We've been struggling with integration issues for months, and our current vendor keeps telling us that their standard configuration should meet our needs. But standard solutions don't work for non-standard businesses." I scheduled a follow-up meeting with Robert for the following week, recognizing that Dynamic Systems could become a flagship client that would open doors throughout the logistics industry. Their requirements were complex enough to showcase our advanced capabilities while generating substantial revenue that would fund further expansion. The drive back to Dallas that evening gave me time to process the day's events and their implications for TechFlow's future. The positive response to our presentation had validated our market positioning, the networking opportunities had generated promising sales prospects, and the encounter with Marcus had confirmed that Coastal Industries remained unaware of the competitive threat we represented. But the most significant realization was how much my perspective had evolved since leaving Coastal Industries. 18 months ago, I had been hoping for Marcus to recognize the value of my ideas and give me opportunities to contribute to the company's strategic direction. Now I was leading a company that was beginning to challenge Coastal's market dominance through the same innovative thinking that Marcus had consistently dismissed. The transformation of TechFlow was accelerating beyond even my optimistic projections, but I understood that our current success was just the foundation for more ambitious goals. The real test would come as we continued to scale the business and establish ourselves as a permanent fixture in the enterprise software landscape. Over the following months, the momentum from the Southwest Technology Conference translated into substantial business growth. The Dynamic Systems engagement became everything I had hoped, resulting in a comprehensive software implementation that solved complex operational challenges while generating our largest single contract to date. More importantly, the success with Dynamic Systems led to referrals throughout the logistics industry, creating a specialization that differentiated us further from generalist providers like Coastal Industries. We developed deep expertise in supply chain optimization software that became increasingly valuable as more companies sought to improve their operational efficiency. By the beginning of our second year under new ownership, TechFlow had established itself as the preferred technology partner for mid-size companies that needed sophisticated software solutions but wanted more personal attention than they could receive from large enterprise providers. Our client retention rate had reached 94%, and our average contract value had doubled since the acquisition. The success metrics were gratifying, but what energized me most was watching the professional growth of our team members as they took on increasingly complex challenges and leadership responsibilities. David Chen had evolved into a visionary CTO whose technical insights were being sought by industry publications and conference organizers. Maria Gonzalez had become a recognized expert in API development whose frameworks were being adopted by other companies. The culture we had built at TechFlow represented everything I had hoped to achieve when I first envisioned acquiring the company. Ideas were evaluated based on their merit, regardless of who proposed them. Innovation was encouraged and properly attributed. Team members were given opportunities to develop their skills and advance their careers based on their contributions and potential. But perhaps most satisfying was the recognition that we had proven the viability of an alternative approach to enterprise software development, one that prioritized customization and client relationships over standardization and operational efficiency. Our success was demonstrating that there was substantial market demand for companies willing to invest the additional effort required to deliver superior results. As spring arrived and we began planning for our third year of operations, I reflected on how the journey had exceeded every expectation I had when I first submitted that ignored email to Marcus Brennan. TechFlow had become more than just a successful acquisition. It had become proof that innovative thinking and strategic vision could triumph over institutional inertia when given the proper support and resources. The irony that Marcus remained unaware of how directly his former employee was now challenging his company's market position added an element of anticipation to our continued growth. Eventually, Coastal Industries would be forced to recognize TechFlow as a legitimate competitive threat, and when that moment arrived, I wanted to be certain we were positioned to capitalize on every advantage we had worked so hard to develop. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would test everything we had built and validate the strategic vision that had guided our transformation from struggling startup to industry challenger. Marcus Brennan was about to discover that dismissing good ideas doesn't make them disappear. It simply gives them the opportunity to flourish somewhere else. The call came on a Tuesday morning in early September, as I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office overlooking the bustling design district. Carmen Rodriguez's voice carried an unusual urgency that immediately commanded my attention, cutting through the routine rhythm of another productive day at TechFlow. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said without her typical pleasantries. "I just got off a conference call with 3 other investment partners, and there's something significant happening in your competitive landscape that you need to know about immediately." I closed my laptop and gave Carmen my full attention. As our lead investor and board member, she had access to industry intelligence networks that often provided early warning about market developments before they became public knowledge. Her tone suggested this wasn't routine competitive analysis. "Coastal Industries just retained McKinsey to conduct a comprehensive market assessment," she continued, "specifically focusing on mid-tier enterprise software providers that are gaining market share in Texas. According to my source at McKinsey, they're particularly interested in understanding how smaller companies are winning business from established players." The implication hit me immediately. After 18 months of steady growth and increasing market visibility, TechFlow had finally attracted serious attention from Marcus Brennan and his executive team. The consulting engagement meant they were no longer viewing us as an insignificant startup, but as a legitimate competitive threat worthy of strategic analysis. "How reliable is your source?" I asked, already mentally calculating the implications for our business strategy. "Extremely reliable," Carmen replied. "The McKinsey partner leading the engagement is someone I've worked with on 3 previous deals. They're conducting interviews with clients who have switched from larger providers to smaller firms, analyzing pricing strategies, and mapping competitive positioning across the entire market segment." This development represented a significant escalation in the competitive dynamics we had been navigating. McKinsey's involvement suggested that Coastal was preparing a coordinated response to the market share erosion they were experiencing from companies like TechFlow. The consulting firm's recommendations could range from pricing adjustments to product enhancements to acquisition strategies. "What's your assessment of their likely response?" I asked, recognizing that Carmen's experience with competitive dynamics across multiple industries would provide valuable perspective. "Based on similar situations I've seen, they have 3 primary options," she explained. "They could try to undercut pricing to make smaller competitors financially unviable. They could accelerate product development to match the customization capabilities that are driving client defections. Or they could attempt to acquire the most threatening competitors before they become too large to integrate easily." Each scenario presented different challenges for TechFlow, but also different opportunities. Aggressive pricing competition would test our ability to maintain margins while continuing to invest in innovation. Product development races would favor us due to our agility advantage over larger, more bureaucratic organizations. Acquisition approaches would force us to decide whether to remain independent or consider strategic partnerships. "There's something else," Carmen added, her tone becoming even more serious. My contact mentioned that Coastal specifically requested information about TechFlow's ownership structure, funding sources, and key personnel. They're not just studying the market in general, they're conducting targeted intelligence gathering about our company. This revelation transformed the situation from general competitive concern to immediate strategic priority. Coastal Industries was no longer unaware of my role in TechFlow's success. They had identified us as a specific threat worthy of detailed investigation. The irony that Marcus was now paying consultants to understand the competitive impact of ideas he had previously dismissed was not lost on me. I spent the remainder of that day conducting an emergency strategic planning session with David Chen and Maria Gonzalez, sharing Carmen's intelligence and analyzing our options for responding to intensified competitive pressure. The conversation took place in our main conference room, with whiteboards soon covered with scenarios, timelines, and contingency plans. The timing actually works in our favor, David observed, reviewing the client acquisition pipeline we had been building throughout the summer. We're in the strongest competitive position we've ever been in, with a full development pipeline and the highest client satisfaction scores in company history. Maria nodded in agreement. Plus, our latest API framework gives us technical capabilities that would take Coastal at least 18 months to replicate, assuming they could attract the development talent necessary to build something comparable. Their confidence was reassuring, but I knew we needed to prepare for competitive responses that could test every aspect of our business model. Coastal Industries had resources we couldn't match, and established relationships throughout the industry that could be leveraged to limit our growth opportunities. The next few weeks brought confirmation that Coastal's competitive assessment was proceeding aggressively. I began hearing from clients and prospects about increasingly frequent sales calls from Coastal representatives, often accompanied by pricing proposals that were significantly below their historical rates. The most concerning development came during a scheduled check-in call with Patricia Williams, the CTO at Meridian Financial, one of our most satisfied clients. Patricia had been an enthusiastic advocate for TechFlow's services since our implementation 6 months earlier, frequently referring other companies to us based on the results we had delivered. "I wanted to give you a heads up about something unusual," Patricia said, her tone suggesting genuine concern. "We received an unsolicited proposal from Coastal Industries yesterday, offering to replace your system with their enterprise platform at no cost for the first year. They claim they can provide all the same functionality plus additional features that you don't offer." This was exactly the kind of aggressive competitive response I had anticipated, but experiencing it directly was still jarring. Coastal was essentially offering to subsidize client acquisition by providing free services, a strategy that smaller companies couldn't match without jeopardizing their financial stability. "What was your response?" I asked, trying to keep any anxiety out of my voice. Patricia laughed. "I told them that switching software systems isn't just about price. It's about reliability, support quality, and strategic partnership. The results we've achieved with TechFlow speak for themselves, and we have no interest in disrupting a relationship that's working exceptionally well." Her loyalty was gratifying, but I understood that not all clients would be equally resistant to aggressive competitive offers. Coastal's strategy was designed to force difficult decisions on companies that might be tempted by short-term cost savings, despite potential long-term complications. The situation intensified further when I received a call from James Morrison, the IT director at Southwest Manufacturing, a prospect we had been courting for 3 months. James had been enthusiastic about our capabilities and had indicated that TechFlow was his preferred choice for their upcoming software upgrade project. "I need to be transparent with you about where things stand," James said, his tone apologetic but firm. "Coastal came in with a proposal that's substantially lower than what you've quoted, and they're offering implementation guarantees that would protect us from cost overruns. My CFO is pushing hard for the Coastal option based purely on the financial comparison. I had prepared for this conversation having anticipated that Coastal would target our most promising prospects with aggressive pricing. Rather than trying to match their offer, I focused on reinforcing the value proposition that had attracted Southwest Manufacturing to TechFlow in the first place." "I understand the financial considerations," I replied carefully, "but I'd encourage you to consider the total cost of ownership rather than just the initial implementation price. Our approach is designed to minimize long-term maintenance costs and maximize system flexibility as your business evolves." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, during which I provided detailed analysis comparing the long-term implications of both proposals. James seemed receptive to my arguments, but I could tell that the financial pressure from his CFO would be difficult to overcome. 2 days later, James called to inform me that Southwest Manufacturing had selected Coastal Industries as their software provider. The decision was purely financial, he explained, acknowledging that he believed TechFlow would have delivered superior results, but that the cost differential was too significant to justify given current budget constraints. Losing the Southwest manufacturing opportunity was disappointing, but it provided valuable intelligence about Coastal's competitive strategy. They were clearly willing to sacrifice profitability in the short term to prevent market share losses, suggesting that our growth had become a genuine strategic concern for their leadership team. I scheduled an emergency board meeting with Carmen Rodriguez and our other investors to discuss our response to Coastal's aggressive competitive tactics. The meeting took place in Carmen's downtown Dallas office, with the city skyline providing a dramatic backdrop for what would prove to be one of the most critical strategic conversations in TechFlow's history. "The situation is evolving exactly as we anticipated," Carmen began, reviewing competitive intelligence she had gathered over the previous 2 weeks. "Coastal is implementing a classic defensive strategy designed to protect market share by making competition financially unsustainable for smaller players." The analysis she presented was sobering but not surprising. Coastal was leveraging their scale and financial resources to offer pricing that smaller competitors couldn't match while maintaining sustainable operations. The strategy was designed to force companies like TechFlow to either accept reduced profitability or lose market share to aggressive competitive offers. "What are our options for responding?" I asked, recognizing that our next strategic decisions would determine whether TechFlow could continue its growth trajectory or would be forced to accept a more limited market position. Carmen outlined 3 potential approaches, each with different risk profiles and resource requirements. We could focus on market segments where customization requirements made Coastal's standardized offerings less competitive. We could accelerate product development to create greater differentiation, or we could consider strategic partnerships that would provide additional resources for competing against larger players. "There's a 4th option we should consider," I said, having given this possibility considerable thought since learning about Coastal's consulting engagement. "What if we go on the offensive instead of just responding defensively?" The room grew quiet as Carmen and the other board members processed the implications of what I was suggesting. Rather than simply trying to defend our existing market position, we could actively pursue opportunities to challenge Coastal Industries directly in their core markets. "That's a high-risk strategy," Carmen observed. "It would require significant additional investment and would expose us to competitive responses we might not be prepared to handle." I had anticipated this concern and had spent considerable time developing a framework for how an offensive strategy could be implemented without jeopardizing our financial stability. The key was to identify specific market segments where Coastal was vulnerable due to their size and organizational complexity. Large enterprise software providers like Coastal have inherent disadvantages when competing for mid-tier clients, I explained, pulling up the analysis I had prepared. Their cost structure requires them to focus on standardized solutions and high-volume implementations. That creates opportunities for companies that can provide superior customization and personalized service. The strategy I outlined focused on targeting Coastal's most profitable clients in specific industry segments, where our technical capabilities provided clear advantages. Rather than competing across the entire market, we would concentrate our resources on opportunities where we could demonstrate superior value despite higher pricing. "The logistics industry is our strongest competitive position," I continued, referencing the success we had achieved with Dynamic Systems and other transportation companies. Coastal's generic enterprise platform doesn't address the specialized requirements that logistics companies need for supply chain optimization. The board discussion continued for 3 hours, examining the financial requirements, competitive risks, and potential returns associated with an aggressive growth strategy. By the end of the meeting, we had agreed to proceed with a targeted offensive approach that would test Coastal's ability to respond to direct competitive challenges. The implementation began immediately, with a comprehensive market analysis to identify Coastal Industries' most vulnerable client relationships in our target segments. Maria Gonzalez led a technical team that developed industry-specific enhancements to our platform, while David Chen focused on building strategic partnerships with specialized consulting firms that worked with logistics companies. Within 6 weeks, we had identified 12 major logistics companies that were currently using Coastal's enterprise platform but had expressed frustration with its limitations in industry publications or conference presentations. These companies represented over $40 million in annual software spending and were exactly the kind of high-value targets that could transform TechFlow's competitive position. The first major opportunity came through our relationship with Dynamic Systems, whose CEO had connections throughout the logistics industry. Robert Kim agreed to facilitate an introduction to Continental Freight, a Houston-based company that had been struggling with integration challenges using Coastal's platform for over 2 years. My initial conversation with Linda Foster, Continental Freight's Chief Information Officer, revealed exactly the kind of dissatisfaction that our strategy was designed to address. Continental had invested substantial resources in implementing Coastal's enterprise system, but they were still unable to achieve the operational visibility and automation capabilities they needed for efficient supply chain management. We're spending more on software maintenance and customization than we anticipated when we signed with Coastal, Linda explained during our first phone call. Their platform requires extensive workarounds to handle our specific operational requirements, and their support team doesn't seem to understand the logistics industry well enough to provide meaningful assistance. This was precisely the opening that TechFlow was positioned to exploit. Our logistics-specific enhancements addressed exactly the operational challenges that Linda was describing, and our support model provided the industry expertise that Continental Freight needed for successful implementation. I proposed a comprehensive evaluation process that would allow Continental Freight to compare our capabilities directly with their current Coastal implementation. The evaluation would include technical demonstrations, reference site visits, and detailed analysis of the financial implications of switching platforms. Linda was intrigued by the proposal but concerned about the disruption and expense associated with changing software systems. "We've already invested significant time and money in the Coastal platform," she noted. "The switching costs would need to be justified by substantial operational improvements." I had anticipated this concern and had developed a migration strategy that would minimize disruption while maximizing the benefits of our enhanced platform. The approach included parallel system operation during the transition period and comprehensive data migration services that would preserve Continental's historical information. The evaluation process stretched over 2 months, during which both TechFlow and Coastal Industries competed intensively for Continental Freight's continued business. Coastal's response included aggressive pricing concessions and promises of platform enhancements that would address Linda's operational concerns. But our technical demonstrations revealed capabilities that Coastal simply couldn't match without fundamental changes to their enterprise architecture. Our logistics-specific features provided real-time visibility into supply chain operations that Continental had been trying to achieve for years without success. The decision meeting took place in Continental Freight's conference room on a Thursday morning in November, with Linda Foster and her entire IT leadership team evaluating both proposals. I had prepared extensively for this presentation, knowing that winning Continental would validate our offensive strategy and potentially open doors throughout the logistics industry. "Both proposals offer substantial value," Linda began, "but TechFlow's platform addresses our specific operational requirements in ways that Coastal's generic enterprise system simply cannot match. The logistics-specific features and industry expertise you've demonstrated convince us that you understand our business in ways that larger providers don't." Winning the Continental Freight contract represented more than just additional revenue. It validated our strategy of competing directly with Coastal Industries in their core markets. The implementation would serve as a showcase for our capabilities and provide reference credibility that could accelerate our growth throughout the logistics industry. The news of Continental Freight's decision spread quickly through industry networks, generating inquiries from other logistics companies that were experiencing similar frustrations with generic enterprise software platforms. Within 2 weeks of the announcement, we had received requests for proposals from 6 additional companies, representing over $20 million in potential annual revenue. But the most satisfying development was learning through industry contacts that Coastal Industries had responded to the Continental Freight loss by conducting an emergency review of their competitive strategy in the logistics sector. Marcus Brennan had reportedly called a special meeting of the executive team to address what he characterized as an unacceptable loss to a smaller competitor. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. Marcus was now devoting significant executive attention and resources to understanding competitive threats from the same company whose foundational strategy he had dismissed when I had presented it to him 2 years earlier. His inability to recognize valuable ideas, when they didn't come from expected sources, had created the very competitive challenge he was now struggling to address. The momentum from Continental Freight's decision continued to build throughout the winter, with successful implementations that generated additional referrals and industry recognition. TechFlow was featured in Logistics Management magazine as one of the year's most innovative technology providers, highlighting our success in developing industry-specific solutions that addressed real operational challenges. More significantly, we were invited to present at the National Logistics Technology Conference, an annual event that attracted CIOs and technology decision-makers from across the transportation industry. This was exactly the kind of visibility that could accelerate our growth by introducing our capabilities to hundreds of potential clients simultaneously. The conference presentation took place in Chicago on a snowy February morning, with an audience of over 400 logistics executives gathered in the main ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. As I walked to the podium to begin our presentation, I noticed several familiar faces in the audience, including potential clients we had been courting and competitors who were undoubtedly evaluating our strategy. The presentation itself was a comprehensive demonstration of how TechFlow's platform could transform logistics operations through enhanced visibility, automated decision-making, and integrated supply chain optimization. We showcased real results from Continental Freight and other clients, providing concrete evidence of the operational improvements and cost savings that our technology could deliver. The audience response exceeded my expectations, with engaged questions and multiple requests for follow-up meetings with potential clients. But the most memorable moment came during the networking lunch afterward, when I found myself in line at the buffet table directly behind Marcus Brennan. He turned around while reaching for a plate, recognizing me immediately despite the context being completely different from our last encounter at the Austin conference. His expression shifted from polite conference networking mode to something approaching genuine surprise as he processed seeing me in this setting. "Sarah Martinez," he said, extending his hand with professional courtesy that couldn't entirely mask his obvious confusion. "I didn't expect to see you here. I thought TechFlow was focused on general enterprise software development." The conversation that followed was one of the most surreal experiences of my professional life. Marcus asked polite questions about TechFlow's logistics specialization, apparently unaware that he was speaking with the former Coastal employee, whose acquisition proposal he had dismissed 2 years earlier. His questions revealed that he still viewed TechFlow as a minor regional competitor, rather than the growing threat to Coastal's market position that we had become. "Logistics is certainly a specialized market," he observed, clearly trying to understand how a company he had barely heard of was presenting at such a significant industry conference. "Have you found that focusing on a single industry segment provides sufficient growth opportunities?" I managed to keep my expression neutral while providing general insights about vertical market specialization, without revealing anything about our expansion plans or competitive strategy. But internally, I was amazed by his continued lack of awareness about the competitive dynamics that were affecting his own company. The conversation concluded with Marcus offering generic advice about the challenges of competing in established markets against larger, more experienced providers. "Companies like Coastal have invested decades in building relationships throughout the logistics industry," he said with characteristic confidence. "It's difficult for newer entrants to establish credibility without proven track records." As I watched him walk away to join other conference attendees, I couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically our roles had evolved since my days as his employee. 2 years ago, I had been hoping for his recognition and support for ideas that could have strengthened Coastal's competitive position. Now, I was leading a company that was actively challenging his market dominance while he remained largely unaware of the threat we represented. The networking lunch provided opportunities to connect with several potential clients who had been impressed by our presentation earlier that day. I collected business cards from decision-makers at 8 companies that represented significant expansion opportunities, each expressing interest in learning more about our logistics-specific capabilities. One particularly promising conversation was with Michael Chen, the Chief Technology Officer at Global Shipping Solutions, a major freight forwarding company based in Long Beach. Michael was frustrated with his current software provider's inability to integrate effectively with international shipping platforms. Exactly the kind of complex technical challenge that TechFlow was designed to address. "Your presentation today addressed problems we've been struggling with for over a year," Michael explained as we discussed his company's technical requirements. Our current system requires manual intervention for processes that should be completely automated, and the vendor keeps telling us that customization isn't possible within their standard framework. I scheduled a follow-up meeting with Michael for the following week, recognizing that Global Shipping Solutions could become another flagship client that would open doors throughout the international logistics industry. Their requirements were sophisticated enough to showcase our most advanced capabilities while generating substantial revenue that would fund continued expansion. The flight back to Dallas that evening gave me time to process the day's events and their implications for TechFlow's future. The positive response to our presentation had validated our logistics specialization strategy, the networking opportunities had generated promising sales prospects, and the encounter with Marcus had confirmed that Coastal Industries continued to underestimate the competitive threat we represented. But perhaps most significantly, I realized that we had reached a tipping point in our competitive relationship with Coastal Industries. No longer were we simply defending our market position against their responses. We were actively pursuing their most valuable clients and winning business, based on superior capabilities and industry expertise. The stage was being set for a more direct confrontation that would test everything we had built and force Marcus Brennan to finally recognize the competitive reality he had helped create through his inability to value innovative thinking when it didn't come from expected sources. The war for market share was about to escalate dramatically, and I intended to make sure TechFlow was positioned to emerge victorious. The announcement appeared in my inbox at exactly 6:43 on a Wednesday morning in March, buried among routine industry newsletters but carrying implications that would reshape everything I had been building at TechFlow. The subject line was innocuous enough: Coastal Industries announces strategic partnership with German technology leader. But the content sent my pulse racing as I recognized the magnitude of what Marcus Brennan was attempting. According to the press release, Coastal had entered into an exclusive North American licensing agreement with Berliner Systemtechnik, a German software company whose logistics platform was considered among the most advanced in Europe. The partnership would give Coastal access to specialized industry capabilities that directly competed with everything TechFlow had developed over the past 18 months. I immediately called David Chen, knowing that his technical expertise would be essential for understanding the full implications of this development. His assessment, delivered in the characteristically direct manner I had come to appreciate, was both alarming and energizing. They're essentially trying to purchase their way out of the competitive disadvantage we've created, David explained after reviewing Berliner's technical specifications. But implementing European software in American logistics operations isn't straightforward. The regulatory requirements, data standards, and operational workflows are fundamentally different. His analysis revealed both the threat and the opportunity that Coastal's partnership represented. While they would eventually gain access to sophisticated logistics capabilities, the integration process would be complex, expensive, and time-consuming. More importantly, their customers would face significant disruption during the transition period, creating opportunities for agile competitors to capture dissatisfied clients. The strategic implications became clearer over the following days as industry publications analyzed the partnership announcement. Several logistics industry analysts expressed skepticism about Coastal's ability to successfully integrate European software with their existing enterprise platform, noting that similar attempts by other American companies had resulted in costly delays and client dissatisfaction. But the most revealing insight came from an unexpected source. Maria Gonzalez had maintained connections with former colleagues at IBM, one of whom had worked closely with Berliner Systemtechnik on previous integration projects. Her intelligence about the German company's software architecture was invaluable for understanding what Coastal was actually acquiring. Berliner's platform is incredibly sophisticated, Maria reported during our emergency strategy session, but it's also incredibly rigid. The system was designed for German manufacturing companies with highly standardized processes. Adapting it for American logistics operations will require extensive customization that could take 2 years or more. This information transformed my perspective on Coastal's partnership from immediate threat to medium-term opportunity. While they worked through the complexities of integrating European software, TechFlow could accelerate our own development and capture additional market share from clients who were unwilling to wait for Coastal's enhanced capabilities. The opportunity became even more compelling when we learned that Coastal was requiring all existing logistics clients to participate in the Berliner integration as part of their standard support agreements. Companies that had been tolerating limitations in Coastal's current platform were suddenly facing mandatory software transitions that could disrupt their operations for months. I immediately convened a war room session with our entire leadership team to develop a comprehensive response strategy. The meeting took place in our main conference room, now expanded to accommodate the additional executives we had hired to manage our rapid growth. The energy in the room was electric, as we recognized the unprecedented opportunity that Coastal's strategic miscalculation had created. "This is exactly the kind of opening we've been waiting for," Carmen Rodriguez observed, joining the meeting via video conference from her office in Houston. Coastal has essentially created a 2-year window during which their logistics clients will be vulnerable to competitive offers. The strategy we developed over the next 4 hours was the most ambitious expansion plan in TechFlow's history. We would launch a coordinated campaign targeting every major coastal logistics client, offering seamless migration services that would allow them to switch platforms without the disruption that Coastal's Berliner integration would require. The financial requirements were substantial, demanding additional investment in sales personnel, technical support staff, and marketing resources. But Carmen's analysis of the potential returns was compelling. If we could capture just 20% of Coastal's logistics clients during their transition period, TechFlow's annual revenue would triple within 18 months. "There's another factor we should consider," I added, outlining an idea that had been forming as we discussed our expansion strategy. "What if we proactively contacted companies that haven't been invited to Coastal's integration process? Smaller logistics companies that might be interested in upgrading from basic software to enterprise-level capabilities?" This insight led to the development of a 2-pronged market expansion approach. We would simultaneously pursue Coastal's existing enterprise clients, who were facing mandatory transitions, and smaller companies that were ready to upgrade from basic logistics software to more sophisticated platforms. The implementation began immediately, with a comprehensive market research project to identify every logistics company in North America that was currently using either Coastal's platform or basic software that could be enhanced. Within 2 weeks, we had compiled a database of over 300 potential clients, representing more than $2 billion in annual logistics spending. The first major opportunity emerged from an unexpected source. Jennifer Walsh, the procurement director at Austin Financial Group, who had chosen TechFlow over Coastal 2 years earlier, called to discuss a referral opportunity that could transform our competitive position overnight. "I've been having conversations with colleagues at other financial services companies about their logistics software challenges," Jennifer explained during our call. "Several of them are Coastal clients who are concerned about the upcoming integration requirements. Would you be interested in presenting your capabilities to a group of CFOs who are evaluating their options?" The meeting she arranged took place at the Four Seasons in downtown Austin, with representatives from 6 major financial services companies gathered around a private dining room table. Each company managed substantial logistics operations for document processing, equipment transportation, and secure delivery services that were critical to their business operations. The presentation I delivered that evening was focused entirely on demonstrating how TechFlow could provide superior logistics capabilities without the disruption and uncertainty that Coastal's Berliner integration represented. Rather than criticizing our competitor directly, I emphasized the stability and reliability that our platform offered during a period when many companies were facing unwanted software transitions. The response exceeded every expectation I had harbored for the meeting. 3 companies requested immediate follow-up discussions, 2 others asked for detailed proposals within the week, and 1 CFO pulled me aside afterward to discuss an emergency evaluation process for replacing their Coastal system before the mandatory integration deadline. "We can't afford 6 months of operational disruption while Coastal figures out how to make German software work with American business processes," explained Robert Zhang, CFO of Pinnacle Financial Services. "Our board has authorized me to find an alternative that can be implemented quickly without compromising our service capabilities." Pinnacle Financial represented exactly the kind of high-value opportunity that could validate our aggressive expansion strategy. Their logistics operations were complex enough to showcase our most advanced capabilities while generating substantial revenue that would fund continued growth throughout the financial services sector. The evaluation process with Pinnacle moved at unprecedented speed, driven by their urgency to avoid Coastal's integration timeline. Within 3 weeks, we had completed technical demonstrations, provided client references, and delivered a comprehensive implementation plan that would have their new system operational 2 months before Coastal's integration was scheduled to begin. The contract signing took place in Pinnacle's boardroom on a Friday afternoon in early May, with Robert Zhang and his entire executive team present to mark what they characterized as a strategic technology decision that would enhance their competitive capabilities for years to come. This partnership represents more than just software implementation, Robert noted during the signing ceremony. It demonstrates our commitment to working with innovative technology providers who understand our industry and can deliver results on our timeline. The success with Pinnacle Financial generated immediate referrals throughout the financial services community, as word spread about companies that were successfully avoiding Coastal's integration disruptions by switching to TechFlow's platform. Our sales pipeline expanded rapidly, filled with opportunities from companies that had never considered changing software providers until Coastal's partnership announcement forced them to reevaluate their options. But perhaps the most satisfying development was learning through industry contacts that Coastal Industries was experiencing significant client retention challenges as their integration timeline became public. Several major logistics companies had already begun exploring alternatives, and Coastal's sales team was reportedly struggling to convince existing clients that the disruption would be worth the eventual benefits. The momentum continued building throughout the summer, with successful implementations that generated additional referrals and industry recognition. TechFlow was featured in Financial Services Technology magazine as one of the year's fastest-growing logistics software providers, highlighting our success in attracting clients from larger, more established competitors. The tipping point came in late August, when we received a call that would fundamentally alter the competitive landscape between TechFlow and Coastal Industries. The caller was Amanda Foster, Chief Operating Officer at Trans Global Logistics, one of Coastal's largest and most prestigious clients in the logistics sector. "We need to have a confidential conversation about our software situation," Amanda said, her tone suggesting genuine urgency. "Coastal's integration timeline has been delayed twice, and we're facing operational challenges that could affect our ability to serve clients during the transition period." Trans Global Logistics was exactly the kind of marquee client that could transform TechFlow's industry positioning overnight. They managed logistics operations for over 200 major corporations, generated more than $50 million in annual revenue, and were widely regarded as a thought leader in supply chain innovation. The initial meeting took place in Trans Global's corporate headquarters in Memphis, a sprawling complex that reflected the scale and sophistication of their operations. Amanda Foster and her team presented a comprehensive analysis of their current situation that revealed just how seriously Coastal's integration delays were affecting their business planning. "We're essentially in limbo," Amanda explained, reviewing the timeline complications that had pushed Coastal's implementation back by at least 8 months. "We can't make strategic technology investments because we don't know what capabilities we'll have access to or when they'll be available." The opportunity she presented was larger and more complex than anything TechFlow had previously undertaken. TransGlobal needed a complete logistics platform implementation that could handle their current volume while providing scalability for future growth, all within a timeline that would avoid any overlap with Coastal's delayed integration process. "This would be a significant undertaking for any technology provider," I acknowledged, reviewing the detailed requirements document that Amanda had prepared. "But it's exactly the kind of challenge that TechFlow was designed to address. Our platform was built specifically for complex logistics operations that require customization and integration with existing systems." The evaluation process with TransGlobal stretched over 6 weeks, during which both TechFlow and Coastal competed intensively for the largest logistics contract in either company's history. Coastal's response included executive-level involvement from Marcus Brennan himself, who personally participated in client meetings to emphasize their commitment to resolving the integration timeline issues. But our technical demonstrations revealed capabilities that Coastal couldn't match even with their promised Berliner enhancements. Our platform provided real-time visibility into supply chain operations that TransGlobal had been seeking for years, along with automated decision-making tools that could optimize their routing and scheduling processes. The decision meeting took place in TransGlobal's boardroom on a Tuesday morning in October, with Amanda Foster, her entire executive team, and 3 board members evaluating both proposals. I had prepared extensively for this presentation, knowing that winning TransGlobal would establish TechFlow as a legitimate enterprise software provider capable of handling the most demanding implementations. Both proposals offer substantial capabilities, Amanda began. But TechFlow's platform addresses our immediate operational requirements, while providing the flexibility we need for future expansion. Most importantly, your implementation timeline allows us to enhance our capabilities immediately rather than waiting for integration challenges to be resolved. Winning the Trans-Global Logistics contract represented the culmination of everything we had been building since I first acquired TechFlow 3 years earlier. The implementation would serve as the ultimate showcase for our capabilities and provide the credibility necessary to compete for any logistics opportunity in North America. The announcement of TransGlobal's decision sent shockwaves through the enterprise software industry, as trade publications analyzed the implications of a major logistics company choosing a mid-sized technology provider over an established industry leader. The coverage emphasized TechFlow's innovative approach to logistics software and our track record of successful implementations. But the most significant development was learning that Coastal Industries had called an emergency board meeting to address what Marcus Brennan characterized as a competitive crisis that threatened their position in the logistics market. According to industry sources, the meeting focused entirely on developing a response to TechFlow's unexpected emergence as a serious enterprise competitor. The irony of the situation was profound and deeply satisfying. Marcus was now devoting board-level attention and resources to addressing competitive threats from the same company whose foundational strategy he had dismissed when I had presented it as his employee 3 years earlier. His inability to recognize valuable ideas when they came from unexpected sources had created the very crisis he was now struggling to manage. The war for market dominance was approaching its climax, and TechFlow was positioned to emerge as the victor in a competition that Marcus Brennan still didn't fully understand. The employee whose email he had ignored was about to become his most formidable competitor, armed with the knowledge, resources, and determination necessary to challenge everything he had built at Coastal Industries. The email arrived at 7:47 on a Monday morning in December, carrying a subject line that made me pause mid-sip of my coffee. Meeting request, Marcus Brennan, CEO Coastal Industries. After 3 years of building TechFlow into his most formidable competitor, the man who had once dismissed my acquisition proposal was now requesting a face-to-face meeting. His message was professionally crafted, but carried undertones of urgency that suggested this wasn't routine industry networking. Sarah, I'd appreciate the opportunity to discuss potential collaboration between our companies. Given the evolving competitive landscape, I believe there may be mutual benefits worth exploring. Would you be available for lunch this week? I forwarded the email to Carmen Rodriguez with a single word. Thoughts? Her response came within minutes, carrying the sharp insight I had come to rely on for strategic guidance. He's either looking to acquire you or form a partnership to stop the bleeding. Either way, take the meeting. You'll learn more about his position than he'll learn about yours. The lunch was scheduled for Thursday at the Capitol Grill in downtown Austin, a location that suggested Marcus wanted privacy and formality for whatever conversation he had in mind. I spent the intervening days analyzing Coastal's recent financial reports and market position, preparing for discussions that could range from acquisition offers to strategic partnerships. Walking into the restaurant, I spotted Marcus immediately at a corner table, his silver hair perfectly styled and his expression carrying the controlled confidence of someone accustomed to directing important conversations. But there was something different about his demeanor, a subtle tension that suggested this meeting represented more than casual business development. Sarah, he said, rising to greet me with a handshake that lingered slightly longer than necessary. Thank you for making time. I know your schedule must be incredibly demanding given TechFlow's recent growth. The initial conversation flowed through predictable territory as we ordered lunch and exchanged updates about our respective companies. But I could sense Marcus carefully steering toward more substantive topics, building rapport before presenting whatever proposition had motivated this meeting. I'll be direct about why I wanted to meet, he said finally, setting down his water glass and meeting my gaze with practiced sincerity. TechFlow has achieved remarkable success in a very competitive market. Your logistics specialization and client service approach have clearly resonated with companies that value innovation and personalized attention. His acknowledgement of TechFlow's success was gratifying, but I remained focused on understanding his underlying objectives. We've been fortunate to work with clients who appreciate technical excellence and industry expertise, I replied neutrally, providing no insights about our strategy or future plans. Marcus nodded appreciatively. That expertise is exactly what I wanted to discuss. Coastal has been evaluating our position in the logistics sector, and we recognize that specialization is becoming increasingly important for serving sophisticated clients effectively. The conversation that followed revealed Marcus's true purpose with crystalline clarity. Coastal Industries wanted to acquire TechFlow, integrating our logistics capabilities into their enterprise platform while maintaining our brand identity and operational independence. The proposal included substantial financial compensation for shareholders and leadership positions for key personnel within Coastal's expanded organization. This would be a transformative partnership, Marcus explained, outlining terms that were genuinely generous from a financial perspective. TechFlow would gain access to Coastal's resources and client base, while we would benefit from your specialized expertise and innovative culture. It's the kind of strategic combination that creates value for all stakeholders. As he spoke, I found myself appreciating the profound irony of this moment. The same Marcus Brennan who had dismissed my TechFlow acquisition proposal 3 years earlier was now offering to pay premium valuations for the company I had built using exactly the strategy he had rejected. His inability to recognize opportunity when it was presented by an employee had cost Coastal Industries tens of millions of dollars and years of competitive advantage. It's an intriguing proposition, I acknowledged, careful not to reveal my thoughts about the historical context. What timeline are you considering for this kind of integration? Marcus leaned forward slightly, clearly encouraged by what he interpreted as genuine interest. We'd want to move quickly to capitalize on current market conditions. I'm thinking we could have definitive agreements completed within 60 days, with operational integration beginning immediately afterward. The urgency in his timeline revealed just how seriously Coastal's board viewed TechFlow as a competitive threat. They weren't just interested in acquiring our capabilities. They were desperate to neutralize the market share erosion we were causing throughout their logistics client base. I allowed the conversation to continue for another 30 minutes, asking detailed questions about integration plans, personnel retention, and operational autonomy. Marcus answered each inquiry with increasing enthusiasm, clearly believing he was closing a deal that would solve Coastal's competitive challenges while providing TechFlow's shareholders with substantial returns. I'll need to discuss this with our board and investment partners, I said finally, maintaining the professional courtesy that the situation demanded. It's the kind of strategic decision that requires careful consideration of all stakeholders' interests. Marcus nodded approvingly. Of course. Take whatever time you need, though I'd appreciate the opportunity to present this proposal directly to your board if that would be helpful. This could be the beginning of something truly significant for both companies. As we concluded lunch and exchanged final pleasantries, I reflected on how completely the dynamics between us had reversed since my days as his employee. Marcus was now the one seeking recognition and validation, hoping I would accept his proposal and solve the competitive problems his earlier decisions had created. The drive back to Dallas provided time to process the meeting's implications and consider TechFlow's options. Coastal's acquisition offer was financially attractive and would provide immediate liquidity for our investors, but accepting would mean surrendering the independence and innovative culture that had driven our success. More fundamentally, selling to Coastal would validate Marcus's approach to competition through acquisition rather than innovation. It would signal that his strategy of buying solutions to problems rather than developing them internally had been correct, despite the fact that this situation existed only because he had failed to recognize the original opportunity. The board meeting to discuss Coastal's proposal took place the following Tuesday in Carmen Rodriguez's conference room, with all our investors and advisory board members participating either in person or via video conference. The discussion was comprehensive and surprisingly brief, as everyone reached similar conclusions about the strategic implications. The financial terms are excellent, Carmen summarized after reviewing the detailed proposal that Marcus had delivered the previous day. But accepting would essentially reward Coastal for ignoring innovation when it was presented to them internally and then scrambling to acquire it externally at premium pricing. David Chen raised additional concerns about cultural integration and operational autonomy. Everything we've built at TechFlow is based on agility, innovation, and client responsiveness. Those qualities don't typically survive integration into larger, more bureaucratic organizations. The unanimous decision was to decline Coastal's acquisition offer while remaining open to discussing strategic partnerships that would preserve TechFlow's independence and culture. I was tasked with communicating this decision to Marcus in a way that left the door open for future collaboration while making clear that TechFlow intended to remain an independent competitor. My response email was carefully crafted to express appreciation for Coastal's interest, while explaining that TechFlow's board had concluded that continued independence best served our long-term strategic objectives. I suggested that both companies might benefit from exploring partnership opportunities that would leverage our respective strengths without requiring full integration. Marcus's reply arrived within hours, expressing disappointment about the acquisition decision, but reaffirming interest in exploring partnership alternatives. His tone suggested genuine surprise that TechFlow would choose continued competition over the financial security that Coastal's offer represented. The following months brought accelerated growth that validated our decision to remain independent. The publicity generated by Coastal's acquisition attempt had elevated TechFlow's industry profile, attracting attention from potential clients who were intrigued by our ability to compete successfully against much larger providers. More significantly, we received inquiries from several European logistics companies that were interested in licensing our technology for international expansion. These opportunities represented potential revenue streams that would have been impossible to pursue as a division of Coastal Industries, which had existing relationships with competitors throughout the European market. The transformation reached its culmination during the annual Logistics Innovation Summit in Chicago, where TechFlow was invited to deliver the keynote presentation about disrupting established markets through specialized technology solutions. The invitation itself represented recognition that we had evolved from regional competitor to industry thought leader. My presentation focused on the importance of understanding client needs deeply enough to develop solutions that address real operational challenges rather than generic technology features. The audience response was enthusiastic, with multiple requests for follow-up discussions and several industry analysts noting TechFlow's emergence as a legitimate alternative to traditional enterprise software providers. But the most memorable moment came during the networking reception afterward, when Marcus Brennan approached me near the registration table. His expression carried a mixture of professional respect and personal curiosity that suggested he was finally beginning to understand the competitive dynamics that had developed between our companies. "Excellent presentation," he said, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "You've built something truly impressive with TechFlow. I have to admit, your success has forced us to reevaluate our entire approach to logistics market development." For the first time in our professional relationship, Marcus seemed to recognize me as an equal rather than a subordinate, whose ideas required his validation. The acknowledgement was gratifying, but it also highlighted how much his perspective had needed to change before he could appreciate capabilities that had been evident years earlier. "Thank you," I replied, appreciating the sincerity in his tone. "Competition has been beneficial for both companies. It's pushed us to innovate and excel in ways that might not have happened otherwise." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right. I've learned that the most valuable ideas don't always come from expected sources, and that dismissing innovation because of its origin is a mistake that can have lasting consequences." As he walked away to join other conference attendees, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment of mutual recognition. The employee whose email he had ignored 3 years earlier had built a company that forced him to fundamentally reconsider his assumptions about competition, innovation, and market dynamics. The war for market dominance would continue, but it had evolved into something more constructive than simple competition. Both companies were now pushing each other toward greater innovation and better client service, creating value for the entire logistics software industry. Standing in that hotel ballroom, surrounded by industry colleagues who recognized TechFlow as a legitimate market leader, I felt profound satisfaction about the path that had led from dismissal to validation. The email that Marcus had ignored had become the foundation for everything we had built, proving that good ideas don't disappear when they're dismissed. They simply find other ways to flourish. 6 months later, TechFlow announced our expansion into European markets through strategic partnerships with 3 major logistics companies, generating international revenue that exceeded our entire North American business from just 2 years earlier. The company that had begun as a struggling acquisition target had become a global technology provider, competing successfully against the largest players in the industry. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning. Marcus Brennan had learned that ignoring innovation doesn't make it disappear. It simply gives it the opportunity to emerge as competition that can reshape entire markets. For TechFlow, that lesson had become the foundation for building something far more valuable than either of us had originally imagined possible. The announcement that would close this chapter of my professional life arrived on a crisp morning in October, exactly 4 years after I had first submitted that ignored email to Marcus Brennan. The caller was Rebecca Morrison from the Wall Street Journal, her voice carrying the excitement of a journalist who had uncovered a story that would capture readers' attention across multiple industries. "Sarah, I'm working on a feature about corporate innovation and missed opportunities," she explained, her tone suggesting she had already conducted extensive research. "Your story with TechFlow and Coastal Industries has become somewhat legendary in business circles. Would you be willing to discuss how a dismissed employee proposal became a $100 million competitor?" The interview request forced me to reflect on a journey that had exceeded every expectation I had harbored when I first walked away from Coastal Industries to acquire a struggling software company. TechFlow's valuation had indeed crossed the $100 million threshold just months earlier, following our successful expansion into Asian markets and the completion of our Series C funding round. I agreed to the interview, recognizing that sharing our story publicly might inspire other professionals who found themselves in similar situations where their ideas were dismissed or their potential overlooked. The conversation took place in TechFlow's new headquarters, a gleaming office complex in Dallas's Uptown district that reflected our evolution from scrappy startup to established industry leader. Rebecca's questions were probing and well-researched, clearly reflecting conversations with industry analysts, former Coastal employees, and several of our major clients. She had pieced together the timeline of events with remarkable accuracy, from my original acquisition proposal to Marcus's eventual attempt to purchase the company he had helped create through his strategic oversights. "What strikes me most about this story," Rebecca observed as we concluded our 2-hour conversation, "is how it demonstrates the hidden costs of dismissing innovation. Coastal's leadership couldn't recognize value when it was presented internally, but they were willing to pay premium prices to acquire it externally." Her insight captured the essence of what had transpired over the past 4 years. Marcus Brennan's inability to evaluate ideas based on their merit rather than their source had cost Coastal Industries far more than just the opportunity to acquire TechFlow at a reasonable price. It had created a competitor that forced them to fundamentally restructure their approach to the logistics market. The Wall Street Journal article appeared 6 weeks later, featuring TechFlow's story as the centerpiece of a broader analysis about corporate innovation and the importance of recognizing talent regardless of its organizational level. The piece included quotes from business school professors, management consultants, and industry executives, who used our experience as an example of how traditional hierarchies could stifle the very innovation they claimed to value. But perhaps the most interesting element was a sidebar interview with Marcus Brennan himself, in which he candidly acknowledged the lessons he had learned from TechFlow's emergence as a major competitor. His comments revealed a level of self-reflection that suggested genuine personal and professional growth. "The TechFlow situation taught me that good ideas can come from anywhere in an organization," Marcus was quoted as saying. "My failure to recognize Sarah's proposal when she was my employee cost Coastal significant competitive advantage and forced us to completely rethink our approach to innovation management." Reading his acknowledgement in print was more satisfying than any vindication I could have imagined years earlier. Marcus had finally understood that dismissing ideas based on their source rather than their substance was a strategic error with lasting consequences. The article's publication generated substantial media attention for TechFlow, including follow-up interviews with business magazines and invitations to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship and corporate innovation. But more importantly, it attracted attention from potential acquisition partners who recognized the value of what we had built. The first serious acquisition inquiry came from Siemens, whose North American operations had been seeking entry into the specialized logistics software market for several years. Their initial approach was exploratory, focusing on understanding our technology platform and market position, rather than proposing specific terms. The conversations with Siemens evolved over several months, during which their due diligence process revealed the full scope of TechFlow's competitive advantages and growth potential. Unlike Coastal's earlier acquisition attempt, which had been motivated primarily by defensive concerns about market share loss, Siemens viewed TechFlow as a platform for expanding their industrial software capabilities. The negotiations were complex and occasionally contentious, involving detailed discussions about valuation, integration planning, and retention of key personnel. But throughout the process, I maintained focus on ensuring that any deal would preserve the innovative culture and client service excellence that had driven our success. The final agreement, announced in February of our fifth year, valued TechFlow at $240 million, while providing guarantees for operational autonomy and continued investment in research and development. More importantly, the deal included provisions for expanding our logistics platform internationally through Siemens' global industrial network. The acquisition closing took place in a conference room high above downtown Dallas, with representatives from both companies gathered around a mahogany table to execute documents that would transform TechFlow from independent competitor to subsidiary of one of the world's largest industrial technology companies. As I signed the final pages transferring ownership of the company I had built from a dismissed proposal, I reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought us to this moment. The email that Marcus Brennan had ignored had indeed become the foundation for something far more valuable than either of us had originally imagined. David Chen, who would continue as CTO under the new ownership structure, captured the mood perfectly during his remarks at our acquisition celebration dinner. 4 years ago, Sarah saw an opportunity that others couldn't recognize. Today, that vision has created value for our employees, our clients, and our investors that exceeds anyone's original expectations. The transition to Siemens ownership proceeded smoothly, with minimal disruption to our operations or client relationships. The additional resources provided by our new parent company accelerated development timelines and enabled expansion into markets that would have been impossible to access as an independent company. But perhaps the most meaningful development was the continued evolution of my relationship with Marcus Brennan and Coastal Industries. Rather than remaining adversaries, our companies began collaborating on industry standards and joint ventures that leveraged our respective strengths in different market segments. The collaboration reached its pinnacle during the development of the Unified Logistics Platform, an industry-wide initiative that combined TechFlow's specialized capabilities with Coastal's enterprise infrastructure to create integrated solutions for the largest multinational corporations. Marcus and I found ourselves working together as equals for the first time, combining our different perspectives and experiences to solve complex technical challenges that neither company could have addressed independently. The professional relationship that had begun with dismissal and evolved through competition had finally matured into genuine partnership. During one particularly productive planning session for the unified platform, Marcus made an observation that perfectly captured how much our dynamic had changed over the years. "You know, Sarah, I often wonder what would have happened if I had recognized the value of your original proposal when you were my employee." I smiled, appreciating both his candor and the irony of the question. "We'll never know for certain, but I suspect the outcome would have been very different. Sometimes the best innovations come from unexpected paths rather than traditional planning processes." His nod of agreement suggested he had reached similar conclusions about the unpredictable nature of innovation and the importance of remaining open to ideas regardless of their source. The lesson had been expensive for Coastal Industries, but it had ultimately benefited the entire industry through increased competition and accelerated technological development. The story reached its natural conclusion during the annual Technology Innovation Awards ceremony in San Francisco, where TechFlow received recognition as Startup of the Decade for our impact on the enterprise software industry. Standing on stage to accept the award, I thought about the circuitous path that had led from a dismissed email to this moment of industry recognition. In my acceptance speech, I emphasized that innovation often comes from persistence rather than permission, and that the most valuable ideas frequently emerge from sources that traditional organizations might overlook. The audience, composed primarily of technology executives and entrepreneurs, responded enthusiastically to the message about recognizing talent and innovation wherever they might appear. After the ceremony, as I mingled with other award recipients and industry leaders, I was approached by a young woman who introduced herself as a product manager at a major technology company. Her question was both familiar and poignant. "How do you get leadership attention for ideas when you're not in a senior position?" My answer reflected everything I had learned about persistence, preparation, and the importance of believing in your own vision, even when others don't immediately recognize its value. Document everything. Build relationships with people who share your vision, and be prepared to create your own opportunities if traditional channels don't work. As the evening concluded, and I prepared to return to Dallas, I reflected on the journey that had transformed a frustrated employee into an industry leader. The email that Marcus Brennan had ignored had become the catalyst for creating hundreds of jobs, serving thousands of clients, and generating hundreds of millions of dollars in economic value. The transformation was complete, but the lessons remained relevant for anyone facing similar challenges in their professional lives. Good ideas don't disappear when they're dismissed. They simply wait for the right circumstances and the right champion to bring them to life. Marcus Brennan had learned that ignoring innovation doesn't eliminate it. It simply gives it the opportunity to flourish elsewhere and eventually return as competition. For me, that lesson had become the foundation for building something far more valuable than either of us had originally imagined possible. The dismissed email had indeed become a competitor worth $240 million, proving that sometimes the most expensive mistake is failing to recognize the value of what's already within reach. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.